For those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve Clemens. I'm editor-at-large of National Interest, and I have the pleasure and privilege of working with NVIDIA and Crusoe in a number of programs that are looking at like what technology is doing. And one of the things technology is doing is it needs a lot of data centers. And the question is, what are those data centers doing? Well, part of that is we're going to discuss today. When it comes to power and it comes to the opportunity, what we have coming in, we're going to have a discussion about all that in a moment. And I have the pleasure of interviewing someone I'm going to introduce in a moment to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of these issues. But let me tell you some of the people that are here that we're going to see, because I want you to know, because this is sort of a speakeasy pop-up-like thing, and why wait for my rival journalist, Amy Harder, whom I do love, to introduce everything. Well, Josh Parker. Josh, wave your hand. Where are you? Josh is there. He is the head of sustainability at NVIDIA. He lives like in Denver. He's cool. So Josh, wave your hand in case you want to meet somebody there. We have Cully Cavness, who's the co-founder and president of Crusoe. Kelly, where are you? Cully, we're there. Okay, right there in the back. See, none of you seated up here. You're lucky. You'll have to find him on your own. And we have Varun, who's really cool. Varun Sivaram, who is the founder and CEO of Emerald AI. Varun, where are you? In the way back. Have you gotten a drink yet? Do you even drink? Are you old enough to drink? Did you get a card? Okay. I also want to introduce, is anybody here a former undersecretary of anything? I don't think so. No, he's not. He doesn't count. He's, and there is an assistant secretary here, you know, who's former assistant. Frank Fannin, where's Frank Fannin? Did he leave already? He got a drink and he left? Did he really leave already? No, he didn't. Oh, he's off my list permanently. So Frank Fannin's here somewhere. But the real celebrity, you know, just because I recognize formers, Dan Poneman. Dan is our former Deputy Secretary of Energy here in the room. Dan, wave your thing. He also happens to be a super triathlete in case any of you want to have, you know, some way to talk to him about something other than energy. And Amy Harder. Oh my God, this is Amy Harder, brand new, back at Axios, my former colleague in Atlantic Land and National Journal. It's great to see you, and you're gonna get to do the better panel, apparently. No, we're gonna have my friend Joseph Majkut here in a moment. I'm gonna read Joseph's title here, because he is the big cheese. Joseph Majkut is Director of Energy Security and Climate Change Program at CSIS. Joseph, come on up here. So at this program today, that NVIDIA and Crusoe have done, we put together a series of vignettes, like exchanges, to sort of talk about really a very important opportunity, not only what AI is doing to impact the energy profile and picture and what we can do with it, but also to deal with the nuts and bolts of energy efficiency and optimization. Part of this that, frankly, Joseph, there's a lot of assertions out there, not a lot of research, but let me just tell you, I have let's see here, an embargoed copy not for distribution, AI for the Grid, Opportunities, Risks, and Safeguards, which as of today, right, is now available. Yeah, 8 a.m. came up on our website. Okay, so it's all out there. So have a seat here. I was trying to tell you that I had a secret before anyone knew I had it, but it's a real pleasure to have you here, Joseph. Let me just start and ask you to get in this. We're sitting here at a climate change conference, you know, UN Climate Week. And we also have UN General Assembly. You have a convergence of power, like political power, but we're also talking about energy, power in a different sense. Yeah. And we're talking about, and that is very much a big driver in artificial intelligence. NVIDIA, of course, is one of the world's major players in that front. I'd like you to kind of walk us through this paper, which is a Center for Strategic International Studies paper that you did, that gets into the high traction elements of that story. So tell us what are the most important findings about optimizing energy and the role of AI?
Great. Thank you, Steve, and thank you for having us. You should get some of these undersecretaries up here. A year ago, this issue of data center energy use came into like more of the public consciousness. And roughly 8 months ago, we published an independent study trying to estimate what is data center energy use going to be under different scenarios for AI's uptake into the economy, what are the drivers and the roadblocks going to be. And we were dissatisfied at the end of that study because we sort of treated in that study the electricity system as static. And that was a challenge because if you think like, oh, this is one of the most important technology revolutions that humanity has undergone, many people think this. If you think that this is so essential for our national and economic security that we are like imposing the will of the government on the flow of chips and all these other things, like it has to be applied to the energy system as well. And that's what the paper starts to look at. That's a huge question. There's a lot of different elements. And so we tried to focus it on what we thought were going to be immediately helpful actions from or applications of these technologies to our largest national energy problems. That brought us immediately to electricity, where AI-driven demand and a variety of other factors are causing increased costs, reduced reliability, and forestalling or retarding the growth of what is like basically the fuel for the economic
Now I've read your paper, and if I'm not mistaken, and a lot of stuff blurs in my mind, you know, but I remember a line that said, over time what's going to happen is when you look at aggregate energy use in the country, 10% is going to be driven by this industry.
Yeah.
Which is a staggering figure when you look. I mean, 10% of American energy use is a huge. Is that healthy for the country?
I think so in general, because reminder, it's like this is like a big economic revolution, right? So if the payoff is, well, we're going to see massive gains in productivity, we're going to see an improving economy, this is a way to restore growth. That is going to require energy, and we know how to manage that. Now, bear in mind, you're talking about data centers already in the single-digit percentages, so that's probably a doubling of electricity use. And then this is like kind of where it gets interesting now, is we had already, as climate people, and this is why it's an important conversation to have here, we had already envisioned a doubling of the electricity grid in the next coming decades as we were trying to deal with the climate issue. Because the fastest way to reduce emissions is to electrify large parts of the economy and to generate clean electricity.
So did Dan Poneman, when he was Deputy Secretary of Energy, fix all the grid problems?
I'm sure, no, I'm like, nobody has fixed all the grid problems.
Well, that's what I was wondering. So, Dan, was it your fault? You know, but I asked this because when you look at demand, we're the guys from Texas. Well, one of them's from Texas, from Houston, and you guys are data center boys. Where are you guys? They're over there. Yeah, they're right there in the middle. You're like very shy. So I was talking to them about Texas, Encore, one of the biggest utilities in the country, growing like crazy, building out things. And I asked the guy, how, when we were in Dallas, we were doing a similar event, and I asked him, you know, what makes you so confident in the future? He says, well, our permitting takes 6 months, and the rest of the country is much, much longer. So Texas is going to become a giant in this field.
Yep.
But it raised this interesting question that you want the benefits of AI everywhere. You want all of this everywhere. You need to power it everywhere. What happens if we just outrun the ability of the grid in the system to deliver?
Well, and I'll do respect to
and how good is the grid today anyway?
The grid is a sophisticated and amazing machine, and if you talk to the people who run it, no one's quite sure why it works.
Okay.
Now, this is
And you're the energy expert at CSIS, right? And that's your official view on the record.
Yeah.
Okay.
But maybe you can take a tool which will surpass humanity's ability to manage and then make inferences from very large data sets, to combine different sources of knowledge, to make forecasts, and to improve those forecasts over time with a feedback learning mechanism. You've described AI, right? And this is actually the heart of the paper, where you think about, let's take those tools and apply them to the problems that we know the grid is having. So we've got examples here that are mostly at sort of the development, ready to be deployed stage for tools that can help increase reliability, deal with emergencies. You know, no secret to folks that grid failures cause enormous economic and human harm. We can forestall that. We can improve the cost efficiency of the grid. I would say that's going to be a number one, number two political issue over the next few years. These tools complement a variety of other ones to help us manage cost escalation in electricity. And then lastly, to achieve growth, first for AI and second for decarbonization, we have tools for that as well.
So how do we measure it? I mean, I would highly recommend that people do a dive into Joseph's paper because it deals with different segments. You might kind of walk through some of those segments. But let me tell you, many years ago, I don't know, Amy, if you were involved in it, but when I was at the Atlantic, and I think NJ was involved, National Journal, we launched something called City Lab with Bloomberg Philanthropies. And City Lab with Richard Florida became its own thing. And this was years ago. I'm ancient, so we were talking to a lot of mayors, and Mike Bloomberg, Rahm Emanuel, some mayors around the country were what they called data mayors. They ran by data on everything. Yeah. And I'll never forget, I asked Rahm Emanuel what was the best thing he did with data, and he said, we watched UPS trucks that were highly efficient in how they turned, and so we changed our trash truck pickup and school bus pickup and saved insane amounts of gas. Now, I thought that was an interesting insight, right, into this, but we're way, way beyond that. So, but what I do find challenging is walking away from your paper and saying, now I understand what the savings and optimization will be. Because you have two things happening at once. You have a massive surge where even coal is back, right? All forms of energy supply, nuclear, but let's just say all of the above is back. Coal has never been priced higher than it is right now we're doing Climate Week. That might not be good for America, right? Let's just put that on the table. All forms are back. How do you get the energy optimization and role of AI to kind of get us back into a sustainable energy use track that still delivers for the AI needs that we have?
Let's say it delivers for the needs of society.
Yes.
And let's take an example, right? So we all know that there's enormous growth that is already here in electricity demand. 10% of power service by the end of the decade is a very reasonable kind of center estimate. That involves building, let's say like roughly 100 gigawatts of new power generation, meaning and that's everything you can build, Steve. Wind and solar. Maybe you can get nuclear online by then. Probably a lot more natural gas than a lot of climate folks would be comfortable with. I will note it's still the cleanest new power add that we've ever had in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. But if you take the technology that we're going to be hearing about in a minute, and you say, what if those data centers were a little bit more flexible than grid regulators asked them to be at the planning stage? And so when you had when you had periods of peak demand, they could cycle down a little bit. There's some academic work that says you could add 100 gigawatts. We talk about it in the paper here. It's a famous study from Duke University. You could manage most of that growth just with flexibility, right? There's a whole other basket of tools that instead of taking these huge data centers, these like mega data centers and flexing those, you take like the houses in a city or across a whole region and you say, all right, at a moment of emergency, we're gonna cycle these down a little bit. And like, Americans are skeptical of that technology sometimes, right? Like somebody telling you how to live your life. But what AI does that's really interesting is you get to tell your AI, right? Here's the terms under which I'm willing to flex, right? Here are the terms under which here's my set of preferences.
Right.
And your computer can then negotiate with the computer at the utility and make a bunch of decisions for you. And then when
you're doing this, is this the flexibility compact you're talking about, or is that a different deal?
Different term, but same general principle.
Tell us about the flexibility compact that you propose.
So the flexibility compact is an idea of if you had a very large data center load, and you wanted to say,
it's these guys here, the data center guys.
Yeah, like Varun's going to come up in a minute and tell us about how great this technology is.
How disruptive is Varun in this equation?
Oh, I think we're going to wait and see.
Okay.
Right, we'll let these. I've known Varun for a really long time. He's a friend, so I don't want to give him too much credit.
Okay.
But the idea is the compact is a question of should this be regulated or should it be voluntary? And the compact is a voluntary mechanism which suits the way the power system in Texas and other places in the United States works and lets it be a negotiation rather than a mandate.
And let me ask you this in a very non-critical way, non-biased way.
Yeah.
How prepared are American electric utilities for this future?
I think they need a lot of help. It's a industry which is fractured, has a bunch of different decision makers who report to a lot of different people. Eventually, they all report both to political agents and customers. That's a tough position to be in. And they are risk averse because the system while no one's quite sure how, the system as it operates today mostly works. And you get in a lot of trouble if you take choices that allow it to not.
I'm going to give Dan Poneman a chance to ask a question here for a moment. He always has a question or some position with a lot of attitude. But before I do that, as we're thinking about powering a more productive energy future, I think the big thing that I'm interested in is the kind of intelligence that companies like NVIDIA and the future of AI actually generate and give. Is there any beta model of this right now that's out there working and operating in ways? Look, I mean, I find the future one I'm ready to jump into and embrace. I'm a kind of, I'll just put my cards on the table. I understand their guardrails, all the guardrails people, I get it. But I sort of feel like this is a very important strategic race, and I want to get it right. That's my own personal view. But I am interested in examples where you've seen the data exchange happen and complex systems that have to maneuver, and all of the problems you have from solar and others, and you'll know the lingo better than I do, but basically distributing that energy in the most efficient way so that you avoid overloads or underloads, and that you've got a system that's able to do that. Is there anywhere in the country right now that's doing that well?
Yeah, we see pilot programs. I don't know that we're ready yet to unify, but we see pilot programs like Texas has some very interesting ones related to large data center loads. We're seeing that in the Southeast. PJM, the service area around here, the power market around here, they're trying to implement some of these technologies. One of the places that the paper falls is this is an area where federal government support would actually be quite helpful. Not necessarily on the particulars, but sort of setting a strategic direction.
Is this high on the Trump administration's list to help?
I think we'll get there. They believe we're in an energy emergency. I think that these tools are going to provide relatively immediate answers to some of the questions that we face under that emergency, some of the challenges we face. And if you look at the AI action plan, it had an infrastructure section. Thus far, their solution set has been mostly get rid of permitting challenges and get rid of the climate stuff and build everything we need.
What do you think Secretary Chris Wright is going to dislike the most about your paper?
It's going to challenge their views on renewables, I think, is probably.
On renewables?
Yeah. So the secretary says you wouldn't trust an Uber if you didn't know when it was going to arrive or where it was going to go. That's a statement about the intermittency of renewable power generation, which is the largest new source of power generation we've added every year for the past few years.
So let me tell you how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Do something with Representative August Pfluger. Anybody know August Pfluger? Look him up. He's a great congressman, Republican from Midland, Texas, right? Oil and gas land. And he starts off, when I'm interviewing him at an NVIDIA event, that 40% of the local utilities' power in Midland, Texas is solar. It's really interesting to hear.
Totally.
So it's just interesting.
Right, and already we've seen demonstrations of tools that say they can handle that intermittency thing with better weather forecasting and better systems optimization to 50 or 100% improvement.
Dan Poneman, former Deputy Secretary of Energy, and he was also CEO, of Centris Energy. For those of you who don't know, how many people, this is hard to ask in a progressive climate UN crowd, but how many of you are into nuclear? Okay, so he was CEO of the company. They're all going to buy you can buy them drinks. I think it's all on me tonight. But he was CEO of Centris Energy, which is the line descendant of the Manhattan Project. So that was a very interesting, and he brought back nuclear energy production in the United States. So with that introduction, Dan, it better be a good question.
I've never had that kind of a build-up. You left out the rock and roll.
He does play with Bono and all that stuff.
Anyway, so just one line on Centris, since most of you have never heard it. It is true the first name of Centris was the Manhattan Project.
Closer.
The only country in the world that ever privatized uranium enrichment technology, which can be used to make weapons, is the United States. Who saw the movie Oppenheimer? A lot. So putting the marbles in the bowl, that's enrichment. And the United States has only one company, and it's Centris, that produces something called high-assay, low-enriched uranium, which most of the Generation 4 reactors need. The only other source commercially is Russia, which has issues. But here's a question, and I think it's a fascinating audience, and Varun's here as well. But can you net out for us the AI equation in the following sense? According to McKinsey, last year, data center demand was 21 gigawatts, and by 2030, it's supposed to be 70 gigawatts. That's like 51 gigawatt plants. It's like crazy numbers, right? There may be double counting. I don't know. You would.
Do you think McKinsey's being flamboyant? No.
Flamboyant is not really in my vocabulary.
Yeah.
So whether it's 70 or not,
right,
it's a lot.
Right.
And if you talk to individual companies, including many of them here, they will tell you, we got orders for 10 gigawatts. You will hear very eminent people saying the choke point on AI development is
Got it. I love how you took over the room, Dan,
I'm coming to the question, Steve. So that's one side. And on the other side, according to all these new technologies, AI may be able to assist in managing demand so that maybe that 70 gigawatt comes down. How does it net out in terms of the demand for power needed by AI to succeed versus the ability of AI to mitigate that demand?
So I think it's long-winded, but a great question. You know, so Dan, thank you so much for that great question.
This guy is tough.
No, very good. So, and then because I want to get Amy Harder up here. So, shorter form answer, but equally brilliant.
I think efficiencies are going to do a lot to help manage the energy growth, but we need to be prepared for a world where more energy is being consumed for a very long time, much of it electricity. We needed to be prepared for that anyway, and AI is collapsing the timeline over which we need to find the right solutions.
Well, I want to thank you, Joseph Majkut of CSIS. I want you to commend his paper, AI for the Grid, Opportunities, Risks, and Safeguards, which he's co-written with Leslie Abrahams. Thank you so much for joining us up here, Joseph. Thank you very much. And you're going to stay, right? Because there's some drinking reception afterward. But thank you so much. Go check out. Is this on the website?
It's on the website. If anybody wants it from me, I'll email it to them directly.
Do they go, because you're director of the Energy Security and Climate Change Program, is that the program? Hey, everybody.
Yeah, if you go to CSIS's website, it's
not done. There's a social contract here. Let me now bring to the stage a dear friend, former colleague, and boy, she's been out of town way, way too long. She's moved back. Have you actually moved back to D.C.? No, okay. I shouldn't have asked her that question. She's remote. She's omnipresent everywhere. Amy Harder is National Energy Correspondent at Axios, a former colleague, but she is absolutely, look, how do I say this and not get in trouble? I don't look at her as media or correspondent. I look at her as one of the amazing thought leaders on these issues of energy. So it's great to have you in today's program. Thank you so much, Amy, for doing this. Take it away.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for that nice introduction. It is always great to see Steve, and indeed, I recently rejoined Axios. I'm thrilled to be back. Axios is a very flexible, remote-first company, and I am continuing to live in Seattle, Washington. As the National Energy Correspondent, I will be covering things happening outside of Washington, D.C., and what happens in D.C., how it affects the rest of the world, with a particular focus on AI and the many ways that it will affect the energy and climate debate. So obviously, I jumped at the opportunity to participate in this event, and clearly I'm not the only one who wants to learn about this. So I'm pretty excited and really appreciated the conversation between Steve and Joseph. We'll have a few minutes at the end to hear from you out in the audience with your questions, so please be thinking about things you would like to ask. I will bring up our panelists in a moment, so please, my fellow panelists, get ready to come up here and join me. But first, I have a couple of questions for you in the audience, raise of hands. Raise your hand if you've ever used an AI model. Raise your hand if you've used it in the last 24 hours. How about in the last 24 seconds, as I have been talking? Okay, you can leave if you have. Anyway, you're helping me illustrate the point. AI has catapulted into our lives. I use it all the time. Everything to help me up with questions for this panel. Maybe I'll ask it to summarize Joseph's paper, because at 4,500 words, that's pretty long, but worth every last word. But also planning vacations. Sorry, Joseph, I have read the whole thing because he gave me an embargoed copy. But also planning vacations and other things like that. So we all have a stake in this debate. And as I said, we have an incredible panel to help us unpack all of this. So please, as I introduce you, please come to this stage up here. We have Josh Parker, Head of Sustainability at NVIDIA. We have Cully Cavness, Co-founder and President and COO of Crusoe, and Varun Sivaram, CEO and founder of Emerald AI. Thank you and welcome. Welcome. I know, a little too formal, particularly for you, Varun. You're usually kind of, no, you're pretty much always wearing a tie when I see you.
I will try to be more hip.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. So I'm going to start with a lightning round question, because, it is evening time. Everybody's holding drinks. Attention spans are short. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think AI could change our energy and climate systems? And by change, I mean that in as neutral as possible. I'm not trying to make judgments on what could happen. 1 being not at all, and 10 being completely.
10.
7.
9.
Nice. See, we have some diversity of opinion. So I want to go to the report. So to what extent are each of your companies ready to lean on some of the innovation, items of innovation in that report? And are you concerned that utilities, not exactly known for moving fast, I think Steve and Joseph got at that a little bit, are up for the challenge? Maybe Varun, we'll start with you.
Sure, thanks, Amy. I will note that there's a box in Joseph's report focused on AI demand flexibility. I'm grateful you put that box in because I think it's one of the key solutions to achieve for that level of 9 impact I said, to achieve a positive impact on climate from AI, not a negative one. At Emerald AI, the company that we founded just less than a year ago, actually, we make AI data centers more flexible. That means we can ramp their power up and down on command. And with that capability, you can not only unlock vast amounts of stranded power capacity, 100 gigawatts, as you'll see in the report, but you'll also be able to bring onto the grid more clean energy. Because if AI data centers can act as these giant shock absorbers, you can bring on intermittent and cheap solar and wind and drive down the cost of AI. Amy, your question was, are we worried about utilities? Look, I'm worried about all kinds of inertia. For over 100 years, electric power utilities have assumed that consumers can't change their consumptions when the grid is stressed, right? Sure, there are some marginal tiny interventions, but by and large, you don't expect homes or businesses to ramp down or change their energy consumption. AI data centers are fundamentally different. They have this transformative potential to be flexible. They are large, they respond faster than large manufacturing facilities, and they can move their workloads around the world at the speed of light. No other energy user can do that. So I believe that electric power utilities have a chance to connect AI data centers much faster to power grids if they are flexible. And the tech industry can build far more computing capacity. I'm sitting next to one of the pioneers of this new field, can build computing capacity much faster to advance AI innovation if users are willing to accept very limited, less than 1% of the year, very limited power flexibility that still protects the mission-critical AI workloads. And Emerald AI focuses on protecting the performance of mission-critical AI workloads while achieving power flexibility.
Cully, I want to go to you and kind of tailor that question a little bit more. So your ethos is all about taking wasted energy, often, at least initially from flared gas, and turning that into productive compute. Can you talk about how you're adjusting to this rapid pace of growth? And are you able to keep true to that mission while also meeting the demand?
Yeah, so Crusoe is a energy-first developer of vertically integrated AI infrastructure, meaning we build power plant assets, data centers. We have a manufacturing arm that actually builds components that go into the data centers. We can put our computers inside the data centers, and then we have a software layer on top to make that available as a cloud product in many cases. In terms of how we've evolved as a company, our roots were capturing flared natural gas in the oil field. So this is the gas that's being wastefully burned when there's not a gas pipeline available, and generating power from that to power modular Bitcoin mining data centers that we connected by satellite internet. And we scaled that across 7 states and Argentina, and that became a solution for flaring in the oil and gas business. I think we've realized that while there is hope for a lot of flexibility in the workload of the AI training workload in particular, which can be checkpointed, saved, potentially resumed later, the norm right now in the mainstream data center industry is folks wanting 5 nines, meaning 99.999% reliability of power. And unfortunately, the oil field in North Dakota does not offer you 5 nines of reliability. When the winter storm comes, the well freezes, the road is inaccessible. So we've had to get more creative. We did one project recently where we deployed solar panels and end-of-life EV batteries, way oversized both of those, and we were able to achieve 24/7 local solar power for a modular data center that we fabricated at Crusoe Industries, which is our manufacturing arm. In other sites, we're building natural gas-fired power plants to respond to the speed requirement that the scaling of the industry is requiring. And we're also pretty far down the road on SMR technologies and carbon capture and sequestration in several of our projects. So I would say there is an all of the above strategy. We do continue to have a very strong climate mission and focus at the company. What we also are now in this tension of just speed, and there's the race underway, and we can't lose the race. And so there's a tension between speed and the emissions profile of some of these solutions.
That North Dakota facility with the old EV batteries, that sounds really cool. And I would like to, could I come visit it sometime?
For sure, it's in Nevada, actually.
Nevada, oops. Okay, well,
Partnership with Redwood Materials.
Oh, yeah,
JB
great.
Strobel's company.
When I ask to be invited places in a public setting, it increases my chances of a yes. So thank you. Josh, I want to turn to you now. I think most of us know that NVIDIA is at the center of this debate. Can you just, what's a normal day for you, and where are you focusing your energy on? Is it things that are in Joseph's report? Is it engaging utilities? Is it making sure data centers are as least hot as possible and hyper efficient? How do you divide your time?
Well, because the pace of innovation is so rapid and AI has really just taken off, a big gap that we have in terms of assessing what AI's needs are and AI's potential impact is really focused on education. And so a lot of my personal time I spend with my team collecting data about AI's footprint and also its potential impact, net impact, so including the positive aspects of it, how data centers can be grid assets, as Varun was talking about, potential long-term reductions in emissions because of AI if it's deployed properly. The IEA estimates that AI could reduce carbon emissions by up to 3 to 4 times of its own footprint if we deploy it thoughtfully. And so a lot of my role is making sure that as the pace of innovation continues to be fast, policymakers, partners, and the public understand what the impact of AI is, both positive and negative, and that we take the long-term view of, do we want this technology to be in the service of the public good? Do we want it to create economic development, potentially help us with sustainability challenges, help us with national security, help us with modernization of the grid? And so trying to connect all of those dots to make sure people look and see all sides of the AI impacts is really a big part of it.
Before we talk about the potential benefits of AI and some of the risks of that Joseph outlined in his paper, I want to ask you one more question, Josh, about, so I think in the headlines in the media, we focus on the amount of electricity it demands. Is that what keeps you up at night, if indeed you are being kept up at night about the environmental footprint of AI, or is it something else that we may not be thinking of?
To be honest, the thing that keeps me up the most is just a lack of understanding about AI, because near term, absolutely, we've got a challenge to try to source the energy, the electricity that we need for AI, and the footprint is growing. There's no way around that. The footprint of AI is growing. It will continue to grow. But that's not the end of the question. The question is that okay? Is it okay if we have new energy coming online to service AI? And again, if you take the long-term view and see, what is AI going to do for us? And the reason that I mentioned AI potentially having a 10 on the impact of the energy sector is we're seeing huge impacts right now, proof of concept, AI saving up to 30% in the manufacturing sector, which is much larger load than data centers are. Lots of proof points like that, but there are also moonshots. If we accelerate the achievement of sustainable fusion, for example, by just a year, I'd call that a 10 on the scale of how it transforms the energy sector, and fission as well. And AI is really well positioned to help us with advanced geothermal, with fission, with fusion. And so I think—
You're talking about accelerating the innovation process.
That's right. And accelerating the economic feasibility and reliability of those technologies. AI is best positioned, I think, to help us do that. And if that happens, when that happens, I think it's clearly a 10 out of 10 impact.
That's a good segue to my next question, referencing Joseph's report that him and his co-author write on page 8 of the 13-page, so that's not that long, you guys can all read it. They write, quote, AI systems are considered black boxes. So raise your hand if you agree with that statement. So everybody else understands AI. I think these people have an inflated sense of yourselves. But So the paper continues to talk about the risks of relying on this new technology. And they talk about how its potential is still very much a work in progress. What are the risks of relying on AI, whether it's for, I think on a shorter term basis, grid management? What if there's risks there? So maybe Varun, we'll go back to you. What are some of the risks that you're looking out for while we increase our reliance?
Well, look, you brought this up, Amy, that there are very real risks, and we kind of have a two-path dichotomy. Path number one is what we're currently on. America risks falling behind in AI because we can't build data centers fast enough. In Virginia, the data center capital of the world, it takes 7 years for a data center to connect to the grid. Power prices are soaring. In Columbus, Ohio, the average annual power bill went up by $240 this year, driven by data center demand. And the elephant in the room this week at Climate Week is fossil fuels are set to power the boom in AI data centers. In the US, natural gas is powering most AI growth, and in India, rising coal use, as Steve says to me here, rising coal use could increase global carbon emissions. So lots of bad things in path number one. Those are the risks that I lose sleep about. It's the reason that we founded Emerald AI. Path number two, though, you asked, what's the impact of AI? Why is it a 9 or a 10, as Josh says? Well, AI today is just 4% of American energy consumption, 2% worldwide. The International Energy Agency put out a report saying, hey, there are lots of bigger sectors of the economy. We may not need to worry so much. But fast forward, 2030, we heard from Joseph and others, it's going to be 10 to 12% of American energy demand, and America's kind of the proverbial canary in the coal mine, no pun intended. Other countries will follow. We reached 25% later in the 2030s. And from there, it's who knows. When AI becomes the largest user of electricity on the grid, in path two, it only avoids these bad societal impacts if it becomes a good citizen, a good neighbor. I love what Josh and what Jensen Huang at NVIDIA have been talking about, AI's positive impact on sustainability, because as you say, it can accelerate materials discovery, AI can enable us to manage grids more intelligently, and what we work on, an AI that orchestrates AI training, fine-tuning, and inference. If AI itself can be flexible in how it uses energy, then this 25% user of the grid becomes the grid's greatest ally. And with the grid's greatest ally, you get time to prudently expand your grid instead of expanding at a breakneck pace as we're doing right now. You get time to build out clean nuclear and geothermal sources of energy. I'm glad to hear when Steve asked about nuclear, everybody raised their hands. And you get the opportunity to bring in more intermittent, unreliable, but super cheap clean energy sources, whether solar or wind or batteries. That is path number two, where AI actually ends up being a force for good on the energy system. And I think right now is when we make that choice, because the mid-2030s, we're too late. We're either running AI completely on natural gas and coal, raising power prices, and America's fallen behind in the race, or AI is a force for clean power systems through its innate flexibility. I think we have to get there.
Cully, I want to come back to you. What are the risks that you see from increasingly relying on AI, whether for your operations or as a society?
Yeah, I guess sort of break it into two categories. I would say there's the category of what does AI do vis-a-vis demand and the types of generation that we call on to serve the load of the data centers. And then there's the innovation category of what can AI do to facilitate our path towards new, completely breakthrough types of energy or just improvement of existing types of energy technologies. And in the first category, I think we're seeing this really tight integration now, finally, of data centers with the energy side. So like a third of Crusoe's workforce comes in some way from the energy industry background, from power generation, oil and gas, utilities, these kinds of backgrounds. Is why we call ourselves energy first digital infrastructure builders. And I think that the way that first category is playing out is we have now the customer base with the greatest balance sheets and the greatest willingness to pay for innovative and cleaner energy technologies. And so if that's going to be investing finally in carbon capture and sequestration, if it's going to be small modular nuclear reactors, if it's going to be the solar plus battery solution that I described, we finally have a customer base that's really interested in that, and in some cases willing to pay a premium for power to achieve that kind of a power mix. And so I think that leveraging, and plus it's a massive amount of spend. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of CapEx per year. That's a fertile environment to be the the seed buyer, the initial buyer of some of these new technologies, and to use our purchasing power to create demand signal for energy innovation. On the innovation side, I mean, just within Crusoe Cloud, some really quick examples. We have Avalanche Energy using AI to experiment with their R&D on fusion. We have SES innovating battery materials. We have JUA doing climate modeling. Just a few examples of how the technology itself can push us down the technology path and accelerate that. I think if we're going to get there on smart grids, on fusion, on better carbon capture materials, on better batteries, AI is absolutely going to have to play a role in those discoveries. So, the risk is that we don't achieve that outcome, that the technology falls short of that. I'm like less and less worried about that every day as I see the power of the technology evolving. And I think on the first category, it's sort of incumbent on the folks that are, developing the data centers and the customers to lean into new power sources and try to be the first customer of some of these things like a SMR that could be a breakthrough for cleaning up the emissions profile.
In a moment, I'm going to throw it out to you in the audience, so please be thinking of things you would like to ask. Josh, I want to throw that question to you. You talked about the benefits. You're very bullish, naturally. You're at NVIDIA. But tell us, what's something that worries you about the risks of increased reliance on AI, whether it's, in Joseph's paper, he talks about the potential for hacking electric grids via AI. Like, what's something that concerns you?
I think governance and security are live issues. So absolutely, we need to be thoughtful about deploying AI. We need to have good governance. We absolutely want the world to get AI right. So we should be thoughtful about it. But the biggest gap that we have is really in deploying it rapidly so we can start taking advantage of it. We need to have those guardrails. We need to have the security, and we need to use AI proactively to try to manage some of those risks as well. So if we're going to manage new AI cybersecurity risks, we use AI on the defense as well. So it takes a lot of thought, and we have to be very careful about it. But I think as long as we're doing it thoughtfully, AI offers us the opportunities to counter some of the risks that we're talking about as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think we have somebody with a mic, a couple, yes, microphone right here. And please state your name and who you're with, and please ask your question in the form of a question. We have opportunities for conversation after.
Totally stacked there. Hi, I'm Felix Salmon, formerly of Axios. Amy took my spot. I am at Bloomberg now. I am writing a little bit about pricing compute, and this is a question for Varun. You're talking about data centers flexing down and basically turning off in periods of high demand. And I want to ask you a little bit about the opportunity cost for that, because at that point, you effectively have the grid paying compute prices for electricity, and that seems like crazy money, right?
It's a great question. Do the economics make sense today for data centers to be flexible? And to be clear, we are never asking data centers to shut down. But I've got two gentlemen here who are actually on the ground in the industry. I invite them to come in as well. It makes a lot of sense. The NPV uplift can be, and we've calculated, 15% or more for the lifetime of a data center if you can accelerate its connection to power, or if you take, let's say, a 200 megawatt data center and expand the power capacity to 220 or 240 megawatts that the utility is willing to give you. On net, Crusoe Cloud, or any other NVIDIA cloud partner, is going to be able to sell more GPU hours because they've gotten a larger power envelope faster. And yes, there will be a limited amount of downtime, but you know how much downtime that is? In the worst case, it's going to be up to, as the Duke University report showed, up to 175 hours a year, but more likely, more like 21 hours in a year, that they may ask you to curtail by 25%. It's a small amount of downtime, and in our modeling, we calculate how much the foregone revenue loss is, and it is peanuts compared to the massive revenue increase of selling more cloud compute and also monetizing increasingly expensive demand response. That's a term of art for those folks who aren't deeply in the energy space. The grid will literally pay you if you just sit around and are able to flex, even if they almost never ask you to flex. All these revenue streams far outweigh the downside. And so you're right. power is like 100 or 1,000 times less expensive than GPU hours. But GPU hours, because they're the golden currency, if we can get more of them by accelerating your time to power, you make a lot of money. Last thing I'll say is power is the bottleneck. It's not chip access, it's not land. In America, it's power. Not true in China, but in America, we have to get past that bottleneck.
Another question here.
Hey guys, thanks for the conversation. My name is Joe Bertzel. I'm with Prosody Group. We're on the public affairs PR side of this. So I don't have to tell you guys that public opinion around data centers is shifting quickly, just as we head into a year where 36 of 50 governors are going to run for re-election, 9 out of 10 PUCs are going to have an election. How much are you guys figuring in the shifting landscape, the shifting public opinion on this when you're looking at project dates, completions, et cetera, which obviously is going to have a real impact on your bottom line?
Maybe I can take that one. I mean, I would say it's relative to how you treat the community that you're working within and how you either show up with really a beneficial impact in the community or not. And I would invite anybody to come to Abilene and ask the residents of that city where we're building a 1.2 gigawatt data center. It'll be the most powerful GPU computer in the world as it comes online over the course of this year and next year. And I would say, you know, there's never 100% positive anything response, but we think we've had a really, really positive impact in that community. I mean, the cafes are full, the hotels are full, the rental houses are full, all the contractors are contracted. The mayor and many of the constituents in the community have said a lot of really positive things and have really welcomed us to that community. We've brought 6,400 jobs into a city of about 120,000 people, and that'll be there for years as we build the data center, and then several hundred really high-paying permanent jobs will remain as the data centers operate, and we'll become one of the largest, if not the largest, taxpayer into the city and the county, funding things like the ambulance corps and the fire departments and the schools with really significant double-digit percentage of the entire budget of the community's tax base. So I would say there's like a lot of good there, and of course there are going to be all kinds of stories where not everything goes right and somebody's frustrated. These are projects that are tens of billions of dollars, and a lot of things happen around a project like that. But I think we spend a lot of time. We have members of our team in the room here today who really their primary role is engaging with that community, listening to complaints, helping us solve those complaints when they occur, and just like maintaining that dialogue with the locals.
I think we have time for one more question. We have a lot of hands go up, so hopefully some folks. Can we get the woman in the middle here? Right there.
Hi, thanks so much for this. My name is Michaela Rehnquist. I just wrapped up 6 years with the United Nations Global Compact, the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. I wanted to ask, so Varun had talked about path 1 and path 2, and I think most of us in this room agree that we want to course correct to path 2, and I'm wondering what you all think the biggest barrier is to that course correction, if it's the business case isn't strong enough, there's a lack of policy incentives, maybe the technologies aren't ready to be scaled. I would love to hear more about what you see as the biggest barriers and how we can overcome those.
Maybe Varun or Josh want to take that one?
I'll be brief. I think, and this is, again, consistent with my theme of optimism, but it's sincere optimism. I'm serious, that the barriers are actually being addressed pretty effectively through market incentives. So the companies that are building out most of the data centers are ones that happen to have strong climate commitments. So you're talking about the hyperscalers, the colos, very significant commitments to sustainability. If you look at the renewable power purchase agreements executed over the last 3 years in the United States, half of them are from data centers, half of the greening of the grid. They're willing to pay for extra for clean energy. That's the market dynamics that we're in. And then you have these incentives with the supply constraint on power to do what Varun is talking about, to be flexible so that we can bring more online, unlock that 100 gigawatts of energy. It creates economics, it reduces costs, good for the environment, good for the economy, good for national security. So all of these things are aligning, I think, in a way that makes path 2 much more likely.
All I'll say on this is caution, very justified caution, is what prevents us from moving rapidly from path 1 to path 2. There's billions of dollars at stake. These are the most valuable economic workloads there are. As Joseph has said, even if sometimes they're just generating cat images. They're very economically valuable, and so electric power utilities don't want to mess with load. Cloud computing providers don't ever want to inconvenience a customer. But look, I believe there's such a large incentive. I mentioned that 15% NPV uplift. And we're grateful that Emerald AI, we're a small minnow, but we're backed by some of the most important companies in the world. NVIDIA is our investor. We're supported by Crusoe CEO is our investor. I believe that the largest companies in the world will look at this and say, look, there is actually an economic reason for us to shift to path 2, but we do need to take care. It's hard to move because these are extremely sensitive, economically valuable workloads.
It's one very narrow sort of technical comment is that when people say the constraint is power for building more data centers, I would sort of caveat that and say the constraint is peak power on the grid. And that's a very different thing than the base capacity that we have available. We actually have a lot of slack for 99% of the year. If we could solve for the 1% peak, and that's what some of this conversation is centered around today, and I think what some of the policy will eventually seek to address.
Okay, in our final moments, before I hand it over to Steve for some concluding comments, I want to do a rapid-fire game of Would You Rather. It should only take 30 seconds. Are you guys ready?
Ready.
Would you rather work more with governments or utilities?
Old habits die hard. You can see I'm a former diplomat. I would much rather work with utilities.
Utilities, that's sort of where the rubber meets the road for us.
Yeah, I'd say governments, actually. Yeah.
Look at that, some division. Would you rather have an AI model that always agrees with you or always pushes back?
Always pushes back, for sure.
It pushes back sounds like the better way to learn.
I want someone who agrees with me.
See, we have disagreement over the agreement. Would you rather spend an hour in Climate Week on traffic or 45 minutes on the subway?
Subway, yeah.
So there's good people watching down there.
Is this a trick question? Subway.
It is a trick question for me to judge people who don't take the subway during Climate Week. There is a lot of people out there who don't. I won't ask a raise of hands, though. Final one. Would you rather see the past or change the future?
Well, doing the first helps with the second, but change the future, for sure.
Yeah, change the future.
I feel like I'm seeing the past in the Gilded Age here, so I will change the future.
Well, thank you three very much. I hand it over back to Steve.
What a fantastic panel. Thank you, Amy Harder. Thank you, Josh Parker. I mean, this could keep going, and I want to apologize. Everybody had questions and everything. We're going to hang out for a while. You can ask your questions up here. I mean, I kind of, think at this moment, what I was so impressed with, one, the dexterity. I mean, I think Joseph, Mike, and others set up quite well to kind of walk through this. But I do think, I'm interested really in the sustainability part of this equation, right? How do you apply technology, not just to get more power, but to make it smarter, to make it more efficient? As Dan Poneman was saying, so you maybe don't need as much as you might need. But I worry, does that model win ultimately versus the guy who's Josh Parker's or the gal, whoever it is, who's on the other side of the equation, who's the head of less sustainability? In another company, in another country somewhere, does sustainability lack disregard for sustainability? How does that fit in the global race? So this is a toe in the door discussion, and it was really, really outstanding. I want to thank Josh Parker, who is head of sustainability at NVIDIA. I want to thank Cully Cavness, who's co-founder and president of Crusoe. Varun Sivaram, who is founder and CEO of Emerald AI. I want to thank really the outstanding Amy Harder, who's national energy correspondent at Axios. I want to thank Joseph Majkut. Where's Joseph, who is the Director of the Energy Security and Climate Change Program at CSIS. Joseph, you got to own the room still. He's over there. I also want to tell you, Tara, keep thanking Tara and all of her team. And Frank Fannin, you're back, right? So Frank, I introduced you for buddy, and then you took off, but I guess you came back for the drinks. So all of this is our former Assistant Secretary, very involved in critical materials, which is also another dimension to this. Thank you all very much for coming. Let's give a big round of applause to our panel, but also NVIDIA and Crusoe for sponsoring today's program. And isn't this a great room? So thank you all.